The autumn wind swept through the dusty parking lot of the roadside diner as Marcus pulled his truck into a spot near the entrance. He'd been driving for hours across the Texas plains, his boots worn and his hat pulled low, but something caught his eye before he could head inside for his usual black coffee and pecan pie. A small figure stood near the corner of the building, no more than 8 or 9 years old, with tangled blonde hair and a dirt-smudged face. The little girl held something in her outstretched palm, approaching each person who walked by with a desperate urgency that made Marcus's chest tighten. He watched as she approached an elderly couple. "Please, sir, ma'am," her small voice carried on the wind. "It's real gold. My mama said it's worth something. I just need enough for some food." The couple shook their heads and hurried past, their expressions a mixture of pity and discomfort. Marcus had seen enough. He adjusted his belt buckle and walked toward the child, his spurs jingling softly with each step. "What are you selling there, little miss?" he asked, his weathered face softening as he crouched down to her level. The girl's eyes widened with hope. She held out a delicate gold ring, the band worn smooth with age, a small diamond catching the afternoon light. "It's my mama's ring," she said, her voice trembling. "It's all we got left. But we're so hungry, and mama's too sick to work. I thought maybe someone would buy it so I could get us something to eat." Marcus took the ring gently, examining it closely. It wasn't expensive by his standards, but he could tell it meant everything to whoever had owned it. The inside of the band was engraved with 2 names and a date from 20 years prior. "Where's your mama now?" he asked, handing the ring back to her. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. "She's in our car. We've been living in it for 2 weeks now, ever since we got kicked out of our apartment. Mama lost her job at the factory, and then she got real sick. We don't have nowhere to go." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. He'd built an empire in oil and cattle over the past 30 years, accumulated more wealth than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, but he'd never forgotten where he came from. His own mother had raised him alone after his father abandoned them, working 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He remembered being that hungry child, wearing shoes 2 sizes too small, pretending he wasn't embarrassed when other kids laughed at his threadbare clothes. "Take me to your mama," he said gently. The girl hesitated, suspicion flickering across her face. "Why?" "Because I want to help, sweetheart. I promise I'm not going to hurt you or your mama. I just want to make sure you're both okay." Something in his eyes must have convinced her because she nodded and led him across the parking lot to an old sedan with a cracked windshield. Inside, a woman in her early 30s lay across the back seat, her face pale and glistening with sweat despite the cool weather. Marcus tapped gently on the window. The woman stirred, her eyes opening with alarm when she saw him standing there. She sat up quickly, protective instinct overriding her obvious weakness. "Who are you?" "Sarah, get away from him." "It's okay, Mama," the little girl said. "He asked about the ring. I think he wants to help." The woman, whose name Marcus would soon learn was Jennifer, looked at him with a mixture of fear and exhausted desperation. She tried to smooth down her hair, to restore some dignity to her appearance, but her hands were shaking. Marcus held up both hands in a peaceful gesture. "Ma'am, my name is Marcus Blackwood. I own some land and businesses around these parts. Your daughter here was trying to sell your ring for food, and I'd like to help if you'll let me." "We don't need charity," Jennifer said, but her voice lacked conviction. Her pride was fighting against her hunger and illness, and Marcus recognized that battle too. "It's not charity," he said firmly. "Consider it an investment. I've got a cabin on my property that's been sitting empty for months. Caretaker moved away, and I've been meaning to find someone to look after it. You need a place to stay, and I need someone to keep an eye on things. Seems like we could help each other out." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. You don't even know us." "I know enough," Marcus said. "I know you're trying to keep your daughter fed and safe. I know you haven't given up even though things are hard. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." He reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills. "First things first, let's get you both something to eat. Then we'll get your car checked out by my mechanic, and after that, I'll drive you out to the cabin. You can stay there as long as you need. No strings attached." Sarah tugged on his sleeve. "But what about Mama's ring? Don't you want to buy it?" Marcus smiled and gently closed the girl's fingers around the ring. "You keep that safe, darling. Some things are more valuable than money. That ring has your family's love in it. Don't ever let it go unless you absolutely have to." Over the next hour, Marcus bought them both hearty meals at the diner, watching with satisfaction as color slowly returned to Jennifer's cheeks. She explained how her husband had died 3 years ago in a construction accident, leaving her with medical bills and a young daughter to raise alone. She'd been managing until the factory closed and she'd fallen ill with pneumonia. Everything had spiraled from there. True to his word, Marcus had his mechanic friend check their car, paying for the necessary repairs himself. Then he led them in his truck out to his sprawling ranch, taking a dirt road that wound through grassland and past grazing cattle until they reached a charming log cabin nestled near a creek. The cabin wasn't large, but it was solid and well-maintained, with 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a porch that overlooked the water. Jennifer stood in the doorway, unable to believe what she was seeing. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "It's too much." "The only thing I'm asking," Marcus said, "is that you get yourself healthy and let Sarah go to the school in town. When you're feeling better, if you want to help out around the ranch, there's plenty of work. But there's no pressure. This place is yours for as long as you need it." Sarah ran through the cabin, exclaiming over everything. She'd never had her own bedroom before. Jennifer watched her daughter's joy and finally allowed herself to cry, really cry, for the first time in months. Marcus showed them where everything was, made sure the pantry was stocked, and left his phone number on the kitchen counter. "You call me if you need anything," he said. "Doctor, groceries, anything at all." As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself checking in on them regularly. He drove Jennifer to the clinic and made sure she got the antibiotics she needed. He enrolled Sarah in school and watched as the withdrawn, anxious child began to blossom into a happy, talkative little girl who loved horses and couldn't wait to tell him about everything she'd learned each day. Jennifer recovered slowly but surely. Once she regained her strength, she insisted on helping around the ranch despite Marcus's protests that it wasn't necessary. She had a natural way with horses and a sharp mind for organization. Before long, she was managing his ranch office, handling paperwork and scheduling that he'd been neglecting for years. One evening, 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus sat on the cabin porch with Jennifer while Sarah played by the creek, her laughter carrying on the breeze. "I don't know how to thank you," Jennifer said quietly. "You gave us our lives back." Marcus shook his head. "You gave yourselves your lives back. All I did was open a door. You're the one who walked through it and made something of the opportunity." "Still," she insisted, "most people would have driven right past a desperate child in a parking lot. You stopped. You cared. That makes all the difference." He was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "My mama raised me to believe that we're all just one bad turn away from needing help. She taught me that having money doesn't make you rich, but using it to lift others up does. I've got more than I'll ever need. Seemed wrong not to share it with folks who need it more." Sarah ran up to the porch, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "Marcus, will you teach me to ride tomorrow? Please." "Of course, darling," he said, ruffling her hair. "First thing in the morning." As the little girl ran back to her play, Jennifer smiled. She started calling this place home. "Good," Marcus said. "Because it is." Years would pass, and Sarah would grow up on that ranch, eventually going to veterinary school on a scholarship Marcus quietly arranged. Jennifer would become his ranch manager and, eventually, much more than that. They'd build a life together, founded on mutual respect and gratitude, proving that sometimes the best things in life begin with a simple act of kindness. But none of that mattered as much as that first day, when a desperate child tried to sell her mother's ring for food, and a rich cowboy remembered what it felt like to be hungry and alone. In that moment of connection, 2 lives were changed forever, and a family was born not from blood, but from compassion and the recognition that we're all worth saving when someone cares enough to try. The ring Jennifer had been willing to sacrifice stayed on her finger, a reminder that sometimes holding on to what matters most is only possible when strangers become family, and wealth is measured not in gold, but in grace.